Shavua Tov, good evening. Thank you for joining us here at Beverly Hills Synagogue for the annual Selichot service. I thought that tonight I might share with you some thoughts regarding Selichot itself. What are the origins? How is it that we begin Selichot? The first Selichot very often late at night. Some do it at midnight. Others do it a little earlier as we do here. And then every morning between now and Rosh Hashanah, we will be rising earlier than usual and we'll be coming to shul to say 20 minutes, half an hour's worth of Selichot, Erev Rosh Hashanah, to 1.5, 2 hours, depending where you go. If you come from one of the Sephardic communities, you've been doing this since the beginning of Elul. You've been reciting Selichot. What are the origins? Where does this custom come from? Why do we participate in these extra prayers? And if you know anything about Orthodox Jewish life, of course you know that we pray every single day, and we even have Selichot prayers fairly regularly during the course of our prayers. Even in the midst of Shmona Esrei, of the Amidah, we say, Slach lanu avinu ki chatanu, mechal lanu malkenu ki fashanu. We pray for forgiveness for sins that we may have committed. We have Selichot services included in our regular prayers. Why are we coming here tonight? Why are we going to be here regularly every morning, earlier than usual, to recite Selichot? I'm going to refer to a Rambam, Maimonides. Maimonides, as I've mentioned previously, devotes 10 chapters, no less, to one mitzvah. Doesn't generally do that. The Rambam will devote a couple of lines to a mitzvah, maybe 2 or 3 paragraphs maximum. But 10 chapters to one mitzvah, and that is the mitzvah of teshuvah. And he points out that we need to do teshuvah because we have an accumulation over the past year, since last Yom Kippur, of merits and what I like to refer to as anti-merits. Things that we've done right, things that we have participated in, which are mitzvot, ma'asim tovim, good deeds. We've given charity, we've been kind to people, we've come to prayers, we've kept Shabbat, we've kept kosher, all the many things that we've done over the course of the past year, which count in our merit account. Then we have things that we may have done wrong. Perhaps we've treated people unkindly. Perhaps we didn't check the hechsher on an item of food as we should have. Perhaps we weren't quite as meticulous in our Shabbat observance on 1 or 2 occasions, or perhaps more. Perhaps there are other aspects of our life which we didn't quite match up to our own expectations over the course of the past year. Says Maimonides, it's important that we reckon as if we, at the very least, are hanging in the balance. That we've got around 50% of good deeds that we've done in our merit account, and about 50% in our anti-merit account, and therefore we should participate in the period between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I'll read it in a moment, in things which are going to increase our merit account. Moreover, he says, if you feel that you yourself are okay, you know what? You've done what we call in Hebrew, cheshbon hanefesh. You've done some kind of spiritual soul reckoning. And you've looked into all the things that have happened to you in the past year. And you're pretty convinced that actually your merit account has a higher balance than your anti-merit account. Okay, I'm safe. I'm sailing into Rosh Hashanah I'm better in the merits than I am in the anti-merits. I'm going to be okay. It's not going to help you. Because you belong to a family, to a community, you live in a city, in a country, and who knows what everybody else in your family has done, or in your community. And therefore, even if you feel pretty safe, look around you. Are you certain that everybody in your family, in your community, and you're part of that unit, their fate is your fate, because they're going to be judged as a family and as a community, as a city? Are you certain that the merit account of that unit, whatever it is, however large or small it may be, is the merit account higher than the anti-merit account? And if it isn't, it's not going to help you that your merit account is in excess. You need to concern yourself about the group that you belong to make sure that they are also going to be in excess in their merit account. I remember that I used to pray on Yom Kippur in a synagogue in London, St. John's Wood Synagogue. There was a man in front of me. He was such a distinguished lawyer that they had appointed him a law lord. That means there are certain members of the House of Lords who are not appointed because of their political affiliation. They're appointed to the House of Lords because they've excelled in a certain field. He was such a distinguished lawyer that he was appointed as a law lord in the House of Lords. I used to sit behind him on Yom Kippur for a few years, and every year at Kol Nidre I would tap him on the shoulder. I would say, Tony, just remember, don't just advocate for yourself. Think of me, I'm just behind you, 2 feet behind you. We all need advocates. We need to make sure that on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, our case is going to be well represented in front of God. And whether we have a law lord or we belong to a community which engages in beautiful and heartfelt prayers, serious, no talking, no distractions, joining in, then perhaps we can be certain that our prayers will be accepted and our merit account will continue to rise, so that at the end of Yom Kippur we can look forward to a glorious year. But the Rambam adds something, and it's this that I want to focus on this evening. The Rambam says, "Umipnei inyan zeh," and for this reason, "Nahagu kol vet Yisrael harbot b'tzedakah," it has become the custom for every Jew to increase their charitable giving, uv'ma'asim tovim, and to do good deeds, v'lasok b'mitzvot, and to be involved in mitzvot, in all the commandments of God, mi Rosh Hashanah v'ad Yom HaKippurim, from Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of Rosh Hashanah, until Yom Kippur is over, yeter mikol Hashanah, more than we would do in an ordinary day, in an ordinary week, in an ordinary period of time during the course of the whole year. When it comes to between the beginning of Rosh Hashanah and the end of Yom Kippur, make sure you give a bit more charity. You pray a bit harder. You do more mitzvot, so that you can make sure that you are increasing the merit account for you, for your family, for your community. V'nahagu kulam, says the Rambam. V'nahagu kulam, it has become the universal custom, lakum v'layla b'asarei yamim elu, to wake up during the night, during those 10 days, ulitpalel b'vatei knesiyot, and to pray prayers in the shuls, b'divrei tachanunim, prayers of supplication, ad she'or hayom, until the day has dawned. Says the Rambam, you know why we say Selichot? We say Selichot because we've got to give a bit of extra prayer in this period of time between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Note how that's what he did. We've extended it. Sfaradim have extended it to the beginning of Elul, and us Ashkenazim for a week before Rosh Hashanah, or slightly longer. We say the Selichot. You know why? Says the Rambam, because we need to increase slightly the ordinary amount of prayers that we would say every single day, because it's this period of time between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. My friends, who are we kidding? I mean, what is this really about? You're going to do a few, I hate to say this, but it sounds awfully like, let's say 3 Hail Marys, and put a bit of money in the charity box at the back of the synagogue, church synagogue, you get it, and everything's going to be okay. I mean, is this a joke? We're going to do Teshuvah. This is one of the highest points of the Jewish calendar year. What, we're going to get up 5 minutes early? Going to get 10 minutes early, half an hour early, and that's going to make the difference? We're going to give it a bit more money to charity? Why didn't you give charity 3 weeks ago? Weren't you thinking about it then? Really? Is God that superficial? When we come to Rosh Hashanah, he's going to look at our accounts and he's going to say, well, the entire year, they really were completely useless. But look at this. For the last week and a half, he got up half an hour early. Oh my gosh, for sure we're going to write him, inscribe him into the book of life. Come on. What is really going on here? What is the Rambam trying to say? The Rambam is offering us a rational, helpful piece of advice, of custom, to enable us to get through this period and come out at the other end safely. But we need to understand what he's saying. We'll park that question for a moment. I want to take you to a day in July in 1942 in a place called Bnei Brak in Israel. Anyone here heard of Bnei Brak? Bnei Brak is a suburb, city, town of Tel Aviv. Bnei Brak in 1942 was a very dusty suburb, not that heavily populated. It was started off by a religious Jew from Poland. He brought with him some Jews and he'd attracted mainly religious Jews to live in this location not far from Tel Aviv. They were urbanizing that area and that's where they lived. It began in the 20s or 30s, and of course in the late 30s and around 1940, while it was still possible, large numbers of Jews, whoever could escape from the Nazi inferno that was Europe, came and settled in Eretz Israel, and quite a number of them settled in Bnei Brak if they could get an apartment. There weren't that many apartment buildings there yet. One of the people who settled in Bnei Brak was a man called Rabbi Yosef Shlomo Kahanaman. He had been the rabbi of Ponevezh. Ponevezh was a very, very significant community in Lithuania. He was born in Lithuania. His father-in-law was the rabbi of Ponevezh. And his father-in-law began a yeshiva called Ponevezh Yeshiva. Ponevezh Yeshiva became a beacon of Torah learning in Lithuania. But of course, the moment the war broke out, the yeshiva disintegrated. Somehow Rabbi Yosef Shlomo Kahanaman managed to escape, and he finds himself in Bnei Brak. And he decides he's going to start Ponevezh Yeshiva again. He's going to name a yeshiva in Bnei Brak Ponevezh, and he's going to re-establish the glory of his father-in-law's yeshiva that had existed before the war here in the heart of the Holy Land. Now, if you know your history, you'll know that in 1942, the British, and they were of course in control of Palestine, the British were losing the war in North Africa. There was a man called Erwin Rommel, and he was the head of the Nazi army, the Nazi forces in North Africa, and he was making steady progress, slowly but surely, towards the 8th Army, the British 8th Army, and they were absolutely certain that they would lose. In fact, they say that in Cairo and in Jerusalem and in Jaffa, they were burning the archives of all the British papers that they'd accumulated over the previous 20 years because they didn't want them to fall into the hands of the Nazis in the certain victory that Rommel was going to have. On the 1st of July began actually towards the end of June, they advanced towards a city. It wasn't a city, it was a place in Egypt called El Alamein. El Alamein was really a railway stop. It was one of the interchanges for the railway line in Egypt. And Rommel advanced as far as El Alamein. On the day that he advanced to El Alamein, when the British were panicking and many of them were planning their evacuation from Egypt because they were certain that Rommel was going to win, Rabbi Yosef Shlomo Kahaneman laid the foundation stone for Ponevezh Yeshiva in Bnei Brak. Very same day. And I don't know how many people were there. Quite a number of people who report that they were there, and this story is recorded, say that they came because they thought it was a bit of a comedy. This poor rabbi has lost his mind, and he believes, despite the fact that within weeks Palestine is going to be overrun by Nazis, that he's going to build a yeshiva in the middle of Bnei Brak. What are you talking about? Wait, if the British win the war, then you can build your yeshiva in Bnei Brak. I mean, come on. Who's going to come to this yeshiva if we're all going to be dead or put into concentration camps? This thing seems a bit pathetic. And they challenged him and they said, what are you doing? In a few days the Germans are going to be here. He said, even if people study for a few days, it's worth our while to build a yeshiva. Rabbi, you're dreaming. You're living in cuckoo land. You're dreaming. There's no yeshiva here. Our lives are in mortal danger. He says, yes, I'm dreaming. But my eyes are wide open. And he built the yeshiva. And 76 years later, the yeshiva still exists. Thousands of boys are studying in Ponevezh Yeshiva. And the Nazi army was stopped at El Alamein, not once but twice, because there were 2 battles of El Alamein. And Rommel was thrown out of Egypt. And the British maintained their mandate in Palestine. The Second World War is long over, the Nazis have disappeared, but Ponevezh Yeshiva is still there. I'm going to come back to that as well, because I want to tell you a more personal story of my grandfather. My grandfather was a young man in 1933 whose parents decided when the Nazi government took over that they were going to move from Hamburg, where they lived and where he was born, to Holland, because Germany had been at war only recently, a world war, but Holland wasn't affected because Holland had been neutral, and therefore if they moved to Holland, whatever happens in Germany is not going to affect them. And my grandparents moved to Rotterdam, where they had no family, and they took their son with them. He was about 20 years old, just a little over 20 years old, and he went to train to be a cheese manufacturer. Well, he met a very nice young lady, Rivka Jacobson, and he proposed marriage to her. And Rivka went back to her parents, and he said, I met this charming young German Jewish boy, and he's proposed marriage to me. Well, who is he? Who are his parents? We don't know them. They made their inquiries, and they discovered that my grandfather, Uri Yehuda Cohen, doesn't make any money. He's still living with his parents, and he has no parnassah, no income, no livelihood. So they said, if you're really intent on marrying this young man, not a problem. When he makes a livelihood, you can marry him. Well, 1 year went past, 2 years, 3 years. It's now 1940, 7 years after they got engaged, and the Nazis overran Holland. This was in May 1940. 2 months later, my grandparents, this Uri Yehuda Cohen and Rivka Jacobson, got married. And they went on to have 3 children during the Second World War. My mother, one who unfortunately died, Yitzchak, and a third one, Uziel, who lives today in Jerusalem. And they went on to have several more children after the war. I once asked my grandfather, I said, it puzzles me. If they said that you can only marry Omar when you are making a livelihood, tell me something. In 1940, were you making enough money to support a family? He laughed. No, he said, definitely not. I said, why did you get married? What motivated you to get married? The Nazis had just taken over the country, and in fact, both his parents and his parents-in-law were murdered in the Holocaust, as were most of his family. I said, well, how come you got married? What was going through your head? And he told me the most remarkable thing I have ever heard. He said, in ordinary circumstances, it made no sense for me to get married to grandma. In ordinary circumstances, you only get married when you can support your wife and a family, if that's what you're going to have. And therefore, for 7 years, we were living in ordinary circumstances, and I didn't marry her. And the Nazis overran Holland. I realized we are in extraordinary circumstances. Life had completely changed. Now was the moment to get married. Who cares if I can support her or if I can't support a family? What difference does it make? I may not even be here in 3 months' time. But I have to make this extraordinary effort because I'm living in extraordinary times. And he got married. By the way, he didn't just marry her. He joined the Dutch resistance. He lived behind a false wall in a Gentile home until the end of the war and participated in numerous attacks for which he was honored after the Second World War by the Dutch Queen. He lived in extraordinary times, and when you live in extraordinary times, you just give that bit extra. You do extraordinary things because that's the only way to get through extraordinary times. My friends, the Ponevizharov was no fool. He understood that the British were in danger, which meant that the Jews in Palestine were in danger. But he also recognized that extraordinary times demand extraordinary effort. Do things which stretch you well beyond your natural boundaries. Push the limits and then go even further. Do something which is greater than anything you could imagine doing in ordinary circumstances, because these are extraordinary times. The Rambam, writing all those hundreds of years ago about the period between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, is writing about an extraordinary period in the Jewish calendar year. He's not telling us you can fool God because you gave a few extra pennies to charity. He's not telling us that if you wake up 3 minutes earlier or half an hour earlier, that somehow God is going to be fooled into believing that you are now a tzaddik if 3 weeks ago you schlepped yourself out of bed twice a week and you didn't make it to shul. He's telling us that extraordinary times demand extraordinary effort. Let's be greater than the sum of our parts. Let's be greater than who we are as normal, ordinary people. It's Rosh Hashanah, folks. This is the moment. This is the beginning of a new year. It's not a New Year resolution. We're not looking to do something new for the rest of the year. We're looking to break out of our boundaries, to break out of our ordinary, to break out of our habits. We are a habit-forming creature. Time to change those habits and do something special. And that includes prayer, and that includes charity, and that includes mitzvot, and yes, it includes getting up early. It includes doing something where you have to you rub your bleary eye in the morning and say, what am I doing getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning? You're doing it because you're demonstrating that you understand you live in an extraordinary time, and that demands that you, all of us, are extraordinary. My friends, we tend to think of ourselves as limited to the life that we lead, to the people we know, to the things that we do, to the behavior that is simply the day-to-day life that we lead and share with others. Rosh Hashanah is a moment when we can say to ourselves, we are not ordinary. We are extraordinary. We are not the same person we were a week or 3 weeks or 3 months ago. We are much better than that. No, we're not. We're ordinary people. How are we going to get up so early in the morning? How are we going to push ourselves to the limit? It's amazing what you can do. You can build Ponevezh Yeshiva even when the Nazis are knocking on your door. You can get married and have children with no support, even when the Nazis have overrun your country. You can be a much better version of you. And the Rambam is telling us, not only is it possible, but it makes a difference. And that is the meaning of Selichot. And that is what we can draw out of this period of the Jewish calendar year. I want to take this opportunity of wishing you all a Ketiva v'Chatima Tova. May we have the most wonderful Chagim, a period of Yamim Noraim, which are wondersome, wondrous, and special, but not in any kind of negative way. And may they herald a year of great joy, of great events, and of a level of extraordinariness that even we didn't know we had. Thank you.
Never